Hi, I'm Annie Owens, and welcome to My Dimensional Life. Last week we were talking about Montana and being actually taken in Montana. This week we're actually going to expand upon it because every time I do a video, I always pray about it, I meditate about it, I ask to be able to know what subject I'm supposed to be talking about, or maybe what subject needs to touch somebody out there that needs this information. And so I asked and I prayed about it after we did the Montana one, and I ended up getting questions. I've heard my guide since I was a little kid. I went through my teenage stage, and like most teenagers, you kind of shut things out and don't listen to parents or otherwise. But um, after my near death experiences, being able to hear them came back. I'd actually wake up half asleep, half awake, and actually hear them talking. Um, and so these are my guides. I trust them fully 100%. They never tell me anything negative. They never tell me anything dark. They almost, if they're going to question me, it's to bring the questions in my head so that I get my own answers. And this last time when I did that, they actually told me, "Why did you only tell that portion of the Montana story?" And my answer was, "Well, I wanted it to go in chronological order." And they said, "But if you do it in chronological order, are they really going to know to be able to connect the two stories together of how it all actually came together as one?" And I sat there for a while and I thought about that, and I'm like, okay. And then I actually got questioned on how I had told you last week about how my husband, I had said, I was taken in Montana when I was doing the QHHT, but I left the other parts out that brought me to the point. It wasn't just QHHT that actually brought up Montana, because I literally spaced it out. I'd always thought that it was a dream, it wasn't real. I had just kind of let that part of me go. I did find out about other times of being taken, but it wasn't right after QHHT that I talked to him about Montana. And I promised to always be truthful, so I need to actually go through and tell the rest of the story so that you can connect what happened in Montana early on in my marriage to 25 years later that connected the two parts together. Um, so before I get started, please do like and subscribe to my channel so I can continue to make more videos about things that have happened in my life. So as I told you in Montana the last week, we talked about how I was taken, but then I came back and I was in a daze. Okay, so we kind of let that go and life went on. Life goes on no matter what happens to you, good, bad, ugly, and different. Life always just goes on. And 25 years later, this is how long it took. 25 years later, my kids, I have three boys. My middle son was home from school. He was not feeling very well. And so he was at home alone. He was old enough to be home alone. So anyways, I came back home because I had a job that was just in the morning, so I came home to check on him. And he says, "Mom," he says, "something happened when you were gone." And I got really scared. And I've never kept the truth from my kids. They always known that, Mom has seen aliens, and she's been dealing with it her whole life. So they already knew about that. And it was never a secret with my kids. And so, anyways, he says, "Mom, we would always hear footsteps up and down my hallway. Is there's some type of portal?" Because as I told you before, I deal with paranormal too. I do my best to keep my house clean. I'm very cautious about anything that we watch in my house or any content that's going to come into my house, because I do realize that those influences can change the energy very quickly. I am very cautious about who I let into my house, because that can also change the energy in your house itself. But anyways, at first the portal was in my bedroom, some type of, and it was really weird because I would lay in bed and I would literally see like something peeking out, like there was a wall there, and they're like peeking out of the wall to look around. Shortly after it moved, and it's kind of in my hallway, which happened to be right in front of his bedroom door. And he says, "Mom, I heard footsteps walking up and down the hallway." And he says, and I kind of looked over and I saw what looked like people in different period clothing walking up and down the hallway. And I thought, okay, maybe I'm really sick, really, really sick, and I'm seeing things. But he's hearing the footsteps go up and down the hallway, and even now, you talk to any of my kids, that's just almost normal, and sometimes you see them and sometimes you don't. I try to keep that portal clean and everything because I know it has to do with something that I need to have, and I don't understand that, but that's how it is. But, anyways, he says all of a sudden he sees an alien. It was a tall gray, and he says the tall gray walks up like he's going to my room because I'm at the top of the hallway and turns around and walks back, and he sees me in the room, and he looked inside the room, and he says, I said, Mom, I just said, she's not here, go away, because he was scared. And he says, the being just kind of looked at him and then turned and walked like through the door because they are multidimensional. They can literally shift to be considered more solid like us or to be able to literally go through things. I can't explain it, but I've seen it. I've watched it happen. And so he said it left, and I was like, "Wow, there was a you actually saw an alien in our house." And he says, "Yeah, Mom, that was scary. It freaked me out." And I said, "Okay." So I started going on the internet, and I'm trying to look to see what type of alien being it was. And so, anyways, we actually came to the conclusion as he picked it out. He says that's pretty much what it looked like. It was the wrinkly face gray that I've been talking about, and this wrinkly face gray, the scientific one. And so I was like, wow, that's kind of crazy. I wonder why we have that wrinkly face gray coming to my house. Well, 2 nights later, I found out. I'm laying in my bed and I'm just barely waking up. I'm not quite awake. I'm not quite asleep. And all of a sudden, I see his face in mine. But let's go back just about a week before. About a week before, I started contacting my friends that do the QHHT, and I said, there's something wrong with me. I feel like my head is just so full of information that I can't tap into. I told him, my head is so full of this information. We need to figure out what this is. I knew I was holding information. I didn't understand why, but it was so full that I literally had a hard time concentrating because I could feel it just full in my head. And I was actually already getting the QHHT set up to go out when this incident took place. And all of a sudden, his face is in mine. And I'm going to let you know something about these ET aliens with the dark eyes. If you look in their eyes, there's a neurological link, and you can't get away from it when you look in their eyes like that. It's like they link inside of you, and it's not that they control you, but there's a shift that kind of takes place. And he was looking in my face, and he was telepathically, he was saying, look into my eyes, look into my eyes. I knew he was coming to take something. At the time, I didn't quite know what, but he was coming to take something. And as I told you, I've dealt with him enough to where I'm not afraid of him anymore. And I said, no, if you want something, because the humanness in me came out, and I said, if you want something, you can ask for it. You don't just come and take it from me. You need to ask. Basically, I was teaching them how to be human polite because they're not. When they want something and they need something, they will just, that's the way they think. Just come and take it. And he says, look in my eyes. And I'm just like, no, I wouldn't look into his eyes. I was just shaking my head. Nope, nope, I'm not going to look into your eyes. You can ask. If you want something, you can ask. And so I didn't give it to him, and he took off. He was gone. Gone. Almost like a ghost, just that quick. And I was like, what the heck was that? Because it was the wrinkly face one that my son had seen 2 days before. And I'm like, what the heck is going on? And so I actually contacted one of my QHHT teachers, and I asked her, I said, because she does a lot of people that have had alien abduction, and I said, have you ever had somebody that had an alien? They were coming to take something, and I only can think that maybe it was something in my head because my head feels so full of information that I can't even tap into. And she goes, yes, I have actually had quite a few, and they're contracted. They get contracted with them to retain certain information from them, and then they will literally come back and they will take that information. And I'm like, oh my gosh, okay, okay. So when did I contract? Yeah, I'm like, contract. So I decided, because by this time I'd gotten really good at meditating, and there's a place I like to call and it's my own personal name. I don't know if anybody else calls it that, but you get so deep into it. You first get to where you're relaxed, then you get to a connectedness, then you get to a point. I'm telling you the kind of the stages that I went through when I was learning how to meditate. Then you go to a connectant where you feel like you're connected to everything and everyone on this planet. But then you go a little bit deeper than that, and you go to this place I like to call the void. It's like everything is like completely black. It's not scary, but it's a void. And to me, it's like a connection between worlds. And so I went to this void, and I actually meditated, and I said, "Look," and I'm talking to the tall gray. I said, "If I contracted with you to give you this information, I will give it to you if I actually contracted with you with it. But don't just come and think that you're going to take something. If you're going to take it, I want to know that you took it. That is the only way that I'm going to give it up, is if you allow me to remember that you took it. Don't just come and try to take it and erase my memory." And I literally just kind of put that out there, and I'm like, okay, I'm just going to go to sleep on it, because as my teacher said, this does happen. And I'm just like, okay, I'm going to go to sleep on it. So I went to sleep. The next morning, I woke up just feeling so refreshed, so relaxed. And I was like, wait a minute, my head doesn't feel like full of this information, because I knew it was something there. There was information. What information? I'm not sure, but it was full of it. And I'm like, what the heck? But I had 3 words in my head. 3 words. And it was Snow White Owl. And I'm like, why? And it just kept repeating over and over in my head, Snow White Owl. And so I literally said it out loud. And I said, Snow White Owl. And as soon as I did that, all of a sudden it was that image of his face in mine. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, he came and take it. He did take it. He took it last night. And so I had given him that information, whatever it was. I think it's to be able to maybe understand humankind, because you're taking the information with all the emotions and feeling of a human to be able to decipher it, to make it to where you can understand yourself. Because as I told you, they don't have the same range of emotions that we do, to the extreme that we do. And so, anyways, I saw his face and I knew. I'm like, okay, well, at least he did what I asked him to, and to let me know that he's taken it. He didn't just come and take it. He did let me know he took it. But then that started getting more questions in my head. I'm like, okay, I contracted him with him, but when did I contract with him? I don't understand. When did I contract with this thing? This is um, later on in my life. I had dealt with the other tall gray one, the tall white looking female. I had those experiences, and I'm just like, okay, I'm just going to meditate and see if I can find out why or when I contracted with them. And so it was a few nights later, maybe even a week. I decided, okay, because you have to set time aside, because it's very intensive when you go that deep. And so I go into meditation and I go really deep, and I keep asking that question again and again and again, and just staying focused on that, letting everything else just kind of just go right on through, not focusing on that, only the question that I wanted the answer for. And so as I'm meditating, all of a sudden I start watching a movie. It was so surreal, because I was in that movie, and I am literally watching a movie of myself when I was younger, 25 years ago, in Montana. I'm in the tent. I saw myself. I remember I actually got to feel the fear again, that I was being compelled to get out of the tent, and I didn't want to get out, but I ended up getting out of the tent, falling on my husband and him not waking up, stepping out of the tent. And I'm like, oh my gosh. At that point, that's when it clicked. It's like all the things that I'd put in my mind earlier that was just some type of dream, because I'm like, did I make that up? Did I sleepwalk? Even though I don't sleepwalk, I'm like, how exactly did that happen? I just kind of let it go, and I didn't even think about it. Even through learning about my childhood, more of my childhood stuff. I remember the 12-year-old one because the 12-year-old one is kind of went with me my whole life. It's nothing. It was so strong, embedded into me. That's nothing I've ever forgotten. But I had learned about when I was 6 years old and I was being taken, and we'll go through more of those experiences because I'll go more into detail about that. But I never questioned Montana. Never. I never questioned it. It was more like, okay, it was just a dream. Maybe I made that up in my head because I was in that almost like dream state of like in between. When they drop you off, you're in a daze. And so I was watching everything, and then I was watching my husband call me, looking for me, coming out of the tent, and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's so surreal when you find out that what you thought didn't happen actually did. And so, anyways, what ended up happening was I called up my husband and I said, hey, do you remember that Montana incident? And he goes, yeah. I said, did you realize that I had been taken? And he says to me, well, yes, when you started finding out, so that I'm telling you what he said. He says, when I started finding out that you had been taken other times, I kind of put two and two together, but I really didn't want to bring it up because you were already having a difficult enough time assimilating all those experiences into your life. And I didn't want to freak you out about it. And I was like, oh my gosh, I literally thought it was a dream. But that is, he was showing me that that was when I contracted with him to retain this information that he was coming to take. Now, for him, it literally might have been a day because I know that time means nothing. So maybe he was able to slip from one side to the other. And for him, it was almost instantaneous. All he needed was my agreement that it would be okay to do it. So that's just kind of another crazy area to go into. I understand the multidimensionalness of us. I do realize that we actually can be in two places at once, three places at once. I've actually dealt with myself in two different places, and let me tell you, that's really mind-boggling when that happens. We'll get more into that, but I'm going to start trying to explain things that have happened to me and then go ahead and bring it further on down the line. It may take sometimes two, maybe three videos, depending upon what subject we're talking about, because I want you guys all to know how it all ties together. Everything in life is my personal belief. Everything happens for a reason, and you may not know or understand why at that time that happens, but there's always a reason to it. And I think if people start realizing that, it'll take a lot of their fear away with everything that's going on in this world. Everything happens for a reason. As I tell my kids, we can't choose what happens to us. We can only choose how we're going to react to it. And that's very important. Um, I understand that when I came here, this is one of my things that I need to do. And I'm going to tell you right now, I'm not suicidal. I just have to say that because everybody says that, but I literally am not suicidal because I understand a lot more than maybe most people will. Does that make me special? No, it doesn't. It just means I've had different experiences. I came here for different experiences than other people. Everybody has their own reason for coming here, and we're all out to try to live our best life, to become our best person that we can be here. And I do understand that. Everything else to me, in my mind, is almost like a play that's been set up, that we're playing our parts. We're doing the best that we can. Otherwise, I guess we just kind of, with me right now, if everything going on, I'm just like, well, all I can do is enjoy the show because I can't control it. So, I think sometimes if we think that way, that it'll help us be able to deal with a lot of the stresses that are going on in this world right now. But as I said before, please do like and subscribe to my channel. Help me make some more videos, and thank you for listening to me.